So,
what's up, guys?
Thanksgiving rolling around.
Yeah.
Any special hosting a party, attending a party? You do a lot of both around this time of year.
Yeah. We do a lot of both. I think that it will mostly attend. And I think if I'm choosing, do I want to host a party or attend a party? Like for our season of life, I'm like, we have a 1.5-year-old and we have a 4-year-old. So I'm like, I don't want people at my house. Like,
Really? That's funny because it's the opposite over at our house because it's like the kids can sleep in their own beds at like 8 o'clock or whatever.
I think that's one thing for having like friends over, but if a party's happening, our kids are not sleeping.
Party.
Like
yeah,
if we're having lots of people over,
yeah.
I like hosting friends at our house, but if we're talking like party, it depends on we have to.
What kind of party?
What kind of party are we talking? I don't know.
Oh, yeah, Thanksgiving meal kind of a thing.
Yeah, we're gonna go.
Christmas party.
We're gonna go.
There you go.
We're gonna go
lots
places.
of family in town.
Our family's around. They host all of the parties. We have like 5 Christmases that we have to go to. I know there's a movie with 4 Christmases, but ours is 5. So I guess we need a movie.
Clearly. Yes, right. Yes.
Anyways, what about you? Are you going to attend or host?
We are going to do Thanksgiving at our house.
Okay.
We had a crazy thing happen recently where we had gone camping. Mary had created a chili.
You told me about this story, so that's why.
Yeah. So anyway, Mary's a fantastic cook. This is my
Yes.
wife, and she's a fantastic cook. And apparently, though, this huge pot of beans took too long to cool, and they went bad. So we made chili, brought it camping, spoiled beans, and next thing you know, like everyone loved it. They were great going down.
Not great,
but not So what happened was we didn't camp that night. Everybody else was camping. We were there just for the day. We went home, and everybody was on the toilet. It was a mess.
That's rough.
And so then we decided,
no pun.
we would host Thanksgiving, and we will have plenty of porta potties.
Oh my God. So come on.
No,
is she going to be mad at you for blasting her on this podcast?
No, we actually had a lot of fun talking about that afterwards. It was a great laugh.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, it's a good.
Like,
Mary has
sorry,
a good
Mary.
sense of Mary has a good sense of humor about it, and really, I mean, she is a fantastic cook, and this has never happened before in 11 years of being together. But
yeah, I've eaten a lot of her food, and it's delicious.
Yeah,
so yes,
right. But it's just
never
a
happened
random
to me,
occurrence, where it was, and even she felt horrible about it, but.
That's amazing. It's
Isn't
a
that
good
crazy?
story.
Yeah.
So you're going to host.
We're going to host Thanksgiving. Christmas will go up to my dad and mom's. We're hosting or they're hosting with this big Airbnb, and everyone's getting together because they just grew out of their house because I have all these people.
Fun.
You have a lot of people in your family too, right?
Yeah, we do. It's just me and my sister on my side, but then my husband's family, he's like one of 5 siblings, and we're just all starting to get into having kids. So far there's 5, but I'm like imagining our Christmas in the next, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, we're gonna have like 25 children.
That's what
Christmas.
It's like.
It's gonna be insane.
Yeah.
But it's fun. It's the chaos is part of the fun.
I'm one of 11, and then all of my siblings except for 2 are married, and except for one of my brothers, that everyone has kids, so it is a zoo. Yeah.
So 11. So you raised all your siblings then, basically, is what you're saying.
Oh, well, I'd like to think I had a hand in it, being that they're all such amazing people. No.
That's awesome. So fun.
Yes.
Cool.
What are we talking about today?
Yeah, we're going to dive in. Is craftsmanship a lost art? I think that's a big question. But in our last episode, we talked about just the huge failure rate in construction businesses and in the industry. We talked about how 4 out of 5 businesses fail within their first 5 years, which is like an over 80% business failure rate, which is...
It's just crazy, isn't it?
It's scary, and we want to help that. Yeah. So anyways, yeah.
Well... We just start, and then in the last episode, we're talking about what does it take to be a successful business so you don't become part of the statistic. As a former contractor, I was in that space where I felt like I was teetering on the edge, particularly earlier on in the business. And then there was that moment, too, when the business started scaling. So we talked about, like, the business needs craftsmanship. You need skills in the back office processes, the estimating, the sales, the marketing, the people skills in order to run a business. And it's really very few people possess all those skills.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes a long time to get to that point, a long career before you really master all of that stuff.
Right. Yeah. So like speaking to like, hey, we don't want you to be one of the 4 out of 5, right? Like
100%.
Those things are required. Right. And so I think just even getting into some more specifics and breaking that down in our last episode, we touched on all those elements, but what we know and what we found is that great craftsmanship is just rare.
Yeah.
You know, it's rare.
Yeah.
I think consumers are starving for contractors and companies and people that are
Mhm.
exceptional at their craft.
Mhm.
And I think from a contractor point of view, it's the way to set yourself apart
Yeah.
from the rest. And you know, but we do believe it's becoming a little bit of a
Yeah, and
lost
it's
art.
hard to do things right. I
Right.
mean, and if you're new to it, I mean, mastering a craft is not an easy process, and there's so many shortcuts that people take,
Sure.
and it seems a lot more economical, like just get in, get out, be done with it. But you're not getting better in that context. You know,
Yeah.
if somebody is just
Yeah, I would assume like a contractor too is like there's pressures from the consumer too
Mhm.
to not be great because it's like budget pressures
Yeah,
or things like that, even like that outside of the context of like you could be great, but you also have the pressures from your customers
that's a great
too.
point. Yeah, because a lot of times you don't have the opportunity or you don't feel like you have the bandwidth to actually get better at
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
You feel like job to job, I just got to get done with it.
makes sense.
It's not as good as I want to be, but well, I guess it'll work.
Yeah, we'll do it
Yeah,
next time.
right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we'll get better later.
right, right.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that we've really discovered in all of this too is that there's a lot less craftsmen than there were in the past. I mean, you found this amazing statistic where 41%
Yeah.
of the current construction workers are basically going to be retired in the next 8 years.
It's an insane
Yeah,
statistic. I don't know if there's any other
41%
industry like that.
retiring in the
Yeah.
next 8 years.
Yeah.
And if that's true, craftsmen will be like doctors in the next 10 to 20 years. I mean, we're going to have this level of like the number of people entering the space is going to be a lot because I mean, that's where the money will be.
Yeah, it's
And
true.
so people are going to follow that.
Yeah,
and
if you can be head down and stick it out,
Yeah.
like if you're
Yeah,
just
right.
starting out, like
Yes.
keep hustling. It's gonna,
Yeah.
you know, who knows what the market will do, you know, in the
Mhm.
next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Right.
But
Yes.
if the demand's just gonna be outrageous.
It really is. Yeah.
But yeah, today, kind of getting into today a little bit more specifically, like we're gonna talk about the framework for becoming a great craftsman.
Mhm.
And we kind of mentioned that earlier, but very few people ever attain the level of mastery,
Yeah.
like in a trade.
Yeah.
I think it's, you know, it's unique. It's a unique opportunity to build a name for yourself, to start a business, to become great. And there are a lot of reasons for it. I think most people listening to this podcast, they have some level of experience. You know, they've either
Yes.
worked for somebody else. They grew up on the job. Maybe the people listening are already amazing craftsmen. You know, we're not
Yeah.
trying to say you're not. You know,
Yes.
in
Yes.
this, but I think it's really like if you're passionate about becoming excellent,
Mhm.
if you're not content with just staying the way we are today, you know, I think that's a lot of what we talk about is like we want to improve, we want to grow, we want to get better at the things, you know, that we're over and that we do.
Yep.
And if we want to be the best, this podcast is for you.
Yeah.
This episode's for you.
And it's not a stagnant thing. I mean,
Yeah.
you can be very good and lose it
Right.
as well. I mean, it's something you have to maintain. So, so yeah. Well, what does it take to become a great craftsman? You know, becoming a great craftsman requires number one, humility.
Yeah.
You can't learn unless you in a mindset of humility. Practicing the right things. Number two. Number three is really learning the way you learn best.
Mhm.
And four is learning one complete process at a time. This is not the complete list of things. These, I think,
Sure.
are some of the things that I found really helpful.
Right.
And really helped me get to the next level and things that I did learn.
Yeah. And I think too, like if people listening have other things to add to that list of the
We'd love to hear
framework, like add them in the comments. We'd love to
Yes.
hear about them and address them. And, you know, we could address them at a later date too. But I think speaking to number one that you mentioned, humility, we've talked on humility a lot in a lot of different contexts. And I think it's just something that like we're really big proponents of, you know, because we think in order to be excellent, you have to have humility. And so talk us through how does humility tie into being a great craftsman? Because I think it ties into everything in your life, but like maybe
Yeah.
specifically craftsmanship.
Yeah. Well, first off, it's not weak to acknowledge we have stuff to learn. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we think, particularly when it's customer facing, we need to go in there and be the expert, or to our peers even, if just there's a little bit of a, you know, kind of we brag with our peers sometimes and
Yeah.
just being like, oh yeah, we can do that. You know, it's the smartest people I know are also some of the most humble people because
That's
as
true.
they've acquired knowledge and as they've learned things, they've discovered how much they actually don't know. So, I mean, you know, it's interesting how this plays out even in my family. I have 4 boys and
Yeah.
my youngest is 2.
Okay.
And so there's the family dynamic of, you know, the older boys talking about, you know, math and multiplication, everything else. And then, you know, my 2-year-old, and they're like, hey, Matt, did you know? And he goes, oh, yeah, I know that.
Your 2-year-old.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
2-year-old, you know. I mean, it's funny when you see a 2-year-old do it, and it's
Yeah.
hilarious because, I mean, just love it. It's so precious.
Yeah.
But I think we almost act like that as adults too. Yeah, I know that.
We're all 2-year-olds.
Yeah,
Basically.
right. Yeah,
Man.
yeah. I mean,
But
you have your own stories, right? I mean, you
for
have
sure.
little
Yeah, I've
kids
got
too.
little kids, and
Yeah.
it's like I got this. I know,
Yes.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's,
Mom,
it's,
don't worry about it. I've got it.
it's true. But like going back to that, I'm like, we all have a lot to learn in
Mhm.
every area of our
Mhm.
lives, and regardless of how good we are, I think the point is there's always room for improvement.
Yeah, and learning is hard. I mean, we have to embrace the learning process. The toughest bosses or experiences can also be the catalyst for becoming great, and even customers. I had this cabinet shop that I had started. This is a number of years ago when we went from doing a lot of installs and we want to be able to do custom cabinetry and millwork. So part of that was opening up a spray booth. So,
Sure.
Natural, right? How hard could it be? I've done a lot of finishing work prior to that, and now
Sure.
I was just taking the next level of cabinetry and other work. And next thing you know, and if anybody's an expert in finishing, they know how hard this is. But, it's incredibly hard to become a master at finishing.
They're probably
wood.
all laughing at you. The ones listening.
But, the interesting thing was, it was a necessity. I wanted to become good at it because it's something we wanted to provide to our customers as a service. And it was more or less somebody came along and said, can you do this? And we said, sure.
Yep.
We'll figure it out later.
Of course. Natural progression.
And there was the pain of learning something. And I think that's the thing to identify in all this as well, is just being like, their learning is tough.
Yeah.
And, I remember those moments of late nights of trying to figure out, why isn't this finished laying the way it's supposed to? We're doing everything right, except for one thing. And one of the things was our compressor was located outside of the spray booth in a colder area.
This is the temperature.
And the spray booth was conditioned, but the air being piped in was at like 40 degrees, and it was causing weird finish issues.
Crazy.
And so just something that stupid was just pulling your hair out moments, working around the clock, resanding stuff, trying to figure out why this finish is not laying.
Yeah. Well, and not stupid. I'm like, that's just like lack of knowing,
Well,
like
good
to
point.
your point. I'm
Yes, right.
you would think that it would be
Yeah,
fine if
right.
you had never done it before,
Yes,
Like,
but
it's
until you,
inward.
and that kind of speaks back even to the humility point,
Right.
until you actually have done something before,
Right.
you don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
Just like my 2-year-old.
Yep.
I got this,
Yep.
no problem. We, ignorance can kind of be bliss and all of that.
It's
and then,
true. It's
and I think that's kind of the miserable nature of some of this stuff, and we just need to embrace it. Just need to get in and say, yes, learning is tough, and we need to be okay with that, because on the other side of that, becoming great at finishing, then it was like, this is fun.
Yeah.
Now I know something,
'Cause
but
you
learning
mastered
it was
it.
miserable.
Yeah, it's way more fun when you're good at things than
yeah.
things you suck at. I'm like,
Yes.
I hate doing things I suck at.
100%, yeah. But part of that is also like hanging around with people that are better than you, and
Sure.
that requires humility as well. I want to learn. Every situation you go into, you want to hang around with the people, because your peers need to challenge you to be better. The guys need to call you out, and they may be able to say, hey, that's wrong. I remember my dad told me he was working as a junior carpenter, and it wasn't even his boss. It was the senior carpenter he was working with, and he looked over at my dad and said, "What are you doing?" My dad's, apparently he wouldn't say that if he was doing something right.
Right, yeah, sure.
But my dad had the humility to tell him, he said, "Well, Jim, what should I be doing here?" And he said, "Well, you never do it that way because of this." My dad hadn't even thought of that at the time.
Yeah.
But that lesson was how he became a master craftsman himself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting example. I'm like, if somebody was like, "What are you doing?" yelling at you, I would be like, humility is not your first response, probably.
No, it's kind of like,
It's like,
well, what do you know?
defend myself.
Right, exactly. You're attacked. You
Right.
feel like.
Totally. Yeah.
And this kind of ties in really the second point, is practicing the right things,
Yeah.
because so many times we have this myth that like practice makes perfect. And that really it's practice makes permanent.
Yeah.
You practice the wrong things, you'll become very proficient at the wrong things.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I've done that before. I mean, it's crazy how this works out. But to become a great craftsman, you don't just need practice.
Yeah.
You need to be practicing the right things. And we're making habits all the time.
Yep.
And that kind of even ties in with having the right people around us to really challenge us and
Right.
to be able to say, yes, this is the way things are supposed to be done.
Yeah.
Seeking to improve, to grow on where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, like you mentioned it a minute ago, but learning from the right people, surrounding yourself with the right people, you become who you hang out with. That's just true, at least from my perspective, and in life, but also in your craft.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that comes down to even the choice of where to work. If you work for a boss that's hard to work for, but is amazing at their craft, kind of like you mentioned a minute ago, but it's better than somebody who makes you feel good about what you're doing. Like,
100%.
oh, you're so good at this, and really you're not good
Yeah,
at it at all.
you
It's
want
you're not
somebody
growing
to be
at all.
almost overly aggressive in their criticism.
Yeah.
as opposed to somebody that's just like, good job.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I was talking to a painter a few weeks ago, and he was talking to me about a boss that he had started out working for when he got into painting, and how his boss made him paint with his left hand for
Really?
the first, like, I think it was like a 1 to 2 months or something like
Wow.
crazy, which, you know, obviously isn't efficient, like,
No,
for the boss.
no,
But it's
yeah.
like, and I was like, well, why would you do that? And he
Yeah.
was like, so that he can paint just as good with both hands, meaning like less trips up and down the ladder.
Okay.
His
Yep.
width, you know, like his wingspan would have,
Yep.
you know, reached more
Yep.
hard to reach places with his left or right, and could have been excellent. And I'm like, that's something that he's going to take with him, you know. So now he has his own
Mhm.
painting business, and
Mhm.
it's like he's going to train his other people in that too, because it's
Yeah.
it's more efficient, and it's like he's mastered a skill with
Mhm.
both hands. Like, it's
Yeah.
even as simple as
And
that.
at
I
the
thought it was
time, he could have
amazing.
been thinking, well, what a jerk.
Right.
You know, making
Like, this
me
is
paint
stupid.
left-handed.
Like,
Yeah,
this is
exactly.
ridiculous. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna
Could
do
really
that.
react to it.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought that was a really cool story.
Yeah. If you're running your own business, I mean, customers, the most challenging customers I've worked for have also helped me become better because their standards of excellence weren't mine at the time.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they're saying, this is wrong.
Yeah.
And I had to go fix it. And that was part of leveling up too.
True.
And so really embracing those moments as well. The worst customers can sometimes be the catalyst to make you a great craftsman.
That's good.
And really seeking to become a master at whatever we do. And having the mindset of how do you do this correctly as opposed to just trying to get to the finish line of getting it done.
Yeah. Check it off the box.
Yeah, right.
Instead.
And I mean, in order to be a master craftsman, you've got to get that right.
Yep. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Number 3 in all of this like learning process is really learning how we learn best. And this is kind of interesting. It's a little bit a weird point, but I think this is the reality. Some people learn quicker than others. We learn different than each other. And in all of that, there's a tendency for us to compare ourselves to other people.
Right.
You might learn something very quickly, and that takes me a long time, and vice versa. I have a friend. I like to play tennis. He's played less tennis than I have, and he became better at serving, and partly because he didn't learn the wrong things. Like,
right, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah. You know, he actually practiced the right things.
Yeah.
So hence he became
He's
better at
than
it
you.
quicker.
Yeah. Sure.
But nonetheless, it's okay to learn slowly as well. And I think embracing that process of learning and being like, I'm going to learn differently than the next guy.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It's okay with being unique. And learning it's commitment. Becoming great's hard, and really part of mastering a craft is just learning how you learn best.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when you I guess question would be like, when you mastered something, like how did you learn it? Like, how do you learn? You know, I think one thing we've talked about is just identifying a learning style, right? And I think this might like hit people the wrong way because they're like, oh, learning style. Like, it reminds me of school. It goes like, it just brings back, you know, studying and like all the things. But, you know, I think really recognizing like how you learn best in the most efficient way. Like, is it reading? You know, do more of that. If it's visual, watch more YouTube. There's tons of tools out there. I'm not saying every YouTuber knows what they're doing, but, you know, use with caution.
Yes.
But if you're visual, like there's ways to visually see how people do things, you know, and there's lots of resources for that. And I think if it's hands-on, then watching someone that you know, and learning what they do. You know, it might make sense to be an apprentice for a while before you go out on your own, or, you know, like work alongside another sub or, you know, something like that to really level that up.
There's also trial and error. You know, I mean, not that I recommend that. I mean, my grandfather was telling me about the time when he moved from Austria, came to the United States, and he was trying to figure out how a light switch worked. And so he decided he'd just break the switch open and look and see how the thing was working on the inside. It's a painful way to learn.
Sure.
But part of it is really identifying, like, why is it that we're learning by trial and error? Is it that we don't have the humility to go find somebody else, or is it necessity? Like in his case, he didn't know who to ask, and the language barrier was the thing. But nonetheless, it's, you know, is it really a good learning style of trial and error?
Yep.
Most cases
Probably
not.
Not. Yeah.
Yeah. But
or it's slower. Or it's at least slower
right,
too.
Right.
Yeah.
But just what is the motivation behind it?
Sure.
Is it because we're too proud to ask somebody, or is there something we just have to figure it out?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then I think doing more of what works, you know, is kind of to tie into what you're saying there. And then I think number 4 that we talked about is just learning one complete process at a time. You know, it's easy to mistake or make the mistake of taking on too much at once. You know, New Year's resolutions, right? I mean, people do it every year. I do it every year. I do it all the time. Of like, hey, I'm going to bite off more than I can actually chew, you know?
Yep.
I'm going to be a totally different person next year type of
Ben
scenario.
2.0 or whatever version I'm on, 40.0.
It's not happening, right? And so learning one complete process at a time is super, super important. And, you know, we talk about this with like goal setting and things like that too, is you need clear and measurable steps to be able to do something, you know, build the process for something. Not some big goal that's tough to understand or tough to know how to achieve. You know, essentially, it's true in sports. It's true in, you know, learning a language. It's true in anything else you want to learn. You know, I played volleyball in college, and you know, you learn that with practicing a skill of like I was a setter and I spent my time being a setter, you know, or I spent my time serving, or you know, it was a specific thing at a time, a specific skill at a time. You know, if you're a golfer, you're practicing a single golf swing. You're not practicing all of them at one time.
It's so true.
Focusing on a specific task, stroke, things like that, and process, you know, to really master it.
If you want to be a great craftsman, you're going to learn much faster mastering one thing at a time than trying to take everything at once. Such a great point. I mean, the goal is learning that complete process. I remember one of my trade contractors working on a project, and he was challenging me at the time. We had so many things going on in the project. And this kind of carries over to maybe less mastering a skill, but more about that specific job. But he was saying one complete process at a time because he's the drywall guy and he wanted to get that done. It's like, can I just focus on this? But you can take that to so many levels, but in learning as well, you know, being able to do one thing at a time, get it right before you move on to the next thing, you're not overwhelmed. And also, it's more of a goal that you can achieve to your New Year's resolution point. It's like, can you really get that done and excel at it as opposed to just trying to do 50 things and be poor at all of them? And if you have the opportunity to work with somebody that's really good, you need to value that experience. I mean, that is a rare thing. Even if they're just a horrible person to work with, you're like, what a jerk. It's miserable to come to work. But the learning process, if they're challenging you to learn, you can't take that for granted. Being an apprentice is an amazing opportunity.
I remember right in college, I was like, I need an internship. I'm like, because I need something on my resume that's going to help me, you know, because I played volleyball. It was a full-time job, whatever. And so I was like, okay, I'll do an unpaid internship. Like that is not flashy. That's not glamorous for somebody that needs money, you know, and pay for an apartment. But I'm like, I look back at that, like those 3 months where I did an unpaid internship, similar to an apprentice role, you know, it's a lower level. You're getting into it. You're learning. Like if you're hungry to learn, and I think you're most hungry to learn in that phase of your life, probably.
It's a good point. Learn while you're young, guys.
Right. And you can still teach an old dog new tricks, though. I think. I think I'm a proponent of it.
Becoming an older dog.
But I look back at that and I'm like, man, I learned so much in that because it was, I don't know, because it was hard and it was, I don't know, I could have taken it for granted. But if you're actually like, you know, putting focus on it.
You leaned into it. There's a lot of experience from that, even though it was tough at the time.
Exactly.
And the other point is really, if you're in that spot of having people working for you, to be able to cast the vision for those people of helping them understand how rare it is to be working in that environment where they can learn, and in creating an environment where there is a lot of learning going on. And if you're, you know, basically setting them really helping them understand that what they're learning is also valuable to them, not just to you.
That's good.
And so you're like, this is a skill that you will take for the rest of your life. And if you're keeping that in front of them, you can kind of help that pain become a lot less.
Well, it's probably a great way to keep people too. Because if they feel like they're being invested in, I mean, that's a whole nother.
That's a side effect.
It's a whole nother podcast and topic and, you know, all the things. But I'm like, if somebody is like feeling like they're growing in a role, like it adds value to them and to you, you know, and I think they'll stay longer. It'll be easier to keep people. If
such a great point.
If that's a motive. So I think so. In summary, you know, being a great craftsman, really, it, you know, is 4 points. The framework that we kind of just discussed is it requires humility. It requires practicing the right things, learning the way that you learn best. You know, so is it visual? Is it reading? Is it hands-on? Or trial and error? Hopefully not. But we're saying maybe don't do that. Do trial and error by hands-on with someone else. Who knows?
Trial and error in the context of somebody else telling you how to do it.
Exactly. And then learning, you know, one complete process at a time. So maybe as we wrap up, you can kind of give us a few. You have any final thoughts?
Yes. Don't ever be content with where you're at. Even if you are mastering something, it's tempting to coast. Coasting is downhill. there are new techniques, there's new tools, there's new products. I mean, staying relevant takes a little bit of work.
Yeah.
We all know people that were relevant 25 years ago, and you look at them and they say you're a dinosaur today because you didn't stay relevant. You didn't keep up with the craft. So learning never ends. Never be content with where you're at today. Always be seeking to learn, to master new things. And I think that's the spot we find every one of us really finds ourselves in that spot where we want to be better. We're hungry for more. Yeah. And let's not lose that passion. Let's not lose that humility to learn either.
Yeah. And I think people listening, like, you guys have a unique opportunity to really build a name and a brand that's based on craftsmanship and to restore kind of the art of doing great quality work, you know, in whatever trade that may be, you know. I think it's becoming more and more rare. We've touched on it. And it's becoming more and more valuable though too. You know, as a consumer, I'm like, I want somebody that's gonna do amazing work, you know, in my home and things like that. I think it's becoming more valued. You know?
And the statistic at the beginning of like 41% of the current workforce retiring, amazing opportunity.
Oh, huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you know of anybody to get in this space, now's the time. No.
Yes.
But yeah, I think just to kind of end it, if you guys like what you hear, if you got questions, like it,
comment,
share
subscribe.
It, subscribe. Yeah, we'd love
guys. Love to hear the feedback on this episode as well. What did we miss?
Yeah.
Love to get some feedback on how you guys learn best too.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.